Good morning, everyone. So nice to have you. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're getting started today. Our webinar with NESHCo is NESHCo 101, Introducing Healthcare Communications. And I'm joined by a robust group of panelists today. So I'm just going to have them go around and introduce themselves. And Kayla, I'm not sure if you want to get started. Just introduce yourself and talk about your current role.
Hi, my name is Kayla Mudge, and I work for CVS Health as a senior communications consultant. And in my role, I actually lead the national communications for the internal facing audience, meaning provider communications and our corporate colleagues as well. And part of my job is just interacting with our executive leadership, making sure that any information that needs to get cascaded down to our field, especially now that we're in our joint commission survey era, which is when it's a big deal in the healthcare industry, where we're just making sure that we're meeting all of our quality standards that we need to be one of the top healthcare organizations in the country. So that is part of what I do. And then I graduated from the University of Rhode Island in a degree with health studies, which is like a public health degree. Hillary, I'm not sure if you want to kick it off to the next person or if there's anything else.
I'll kick it over to Frank.
Hi, good morning, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Frank Katita. I run a company called Healthcare Decisions Lab, and what I do is I have, as we'll find out in this session, I have sort of a checkered background, but most of the work I do right now is related to developing content for healthcare professionals and studying what I call the neuroscience of buying healthcare IT products. I'm a professor of cross-cultural communications at Northeastern and teach a number of courses in healthcare at University of New England. Sit on a couple boards and worked for a long time for a company called IDG, International Data Group, launching international operations for them, and more recently for HIMSS, the big healthcare technology organization, being on their board of directors, and had my own visit at Mass General for 100 days as a COVID patient and survived.
So glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah. And last but certainly not least, John.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you also for including me in this discussion. I was so excited when I was asked to participate, because I think that there's nothing more important than raising awareness around the exciting opportunities in the world of internal and external communications, in particular as it relates to healthcare. I've loved my years in communications. I have held marketing, communications, PR related roles in a number of different organizations for many years: community hospitals, academic medical centers, systems, standalone organizations as well. I am currently serving in a role overseeing internal communications for Mass General Brigham, which is a Massachusetts-based healthcare system comprised of several community hospitals, specialty hospitals, academic medical centers. I have the opportunity to work with leaders across the system, but I also have the awesome opportunity to work with communications leaders and staff at all of our member organizations, which is really terrific. So we can collaborate very closely on not only system communications, but also making sure that we have really best practice communication protocols, programs, et cetera, in place at all of our member organizations. So love what I do, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Awesome, great. All right, well, super happy to have everybody here, and I'm really happy to be moderating today. My name is Hillary Lima. I'm a senior account executive with SVM PR and Marketing, a public relations firm based in Providence, Rhode Island. And I do a lot of work with B2B health IT companies. And of course, my background was directly in the inpatient hospital world with a couple of hospitals in Rhode Island, and then also a quick stint with CVS Corporate in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So happy to be here today, happy to be leading our discussion. First, I think this is a question we really need to kick off with, because I don't think when you're growing up, you ever think, gee, I want to get into healthcare communications. It's not something that it's one of those things you even know about when you're in high school or when you're going to college. So I'm just curious, how did you guys stumble upon healthcare communications? How did you get into the industry? Because I feel like everybody's path is unique in that respect. So John, I don't know if you want to talk about your path.
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely start because it's really actually an awesome question, because it's always fascinating when you hear the roads to kind of the positions that folks are in today. So after I graduated from college, I went to work in commercial printing, and I did sales for printing and mailing services. And I worked with a lot of healthcare organizations. I worked with a lot of higher ed organizations, and um, did several years in sales, and then I shifted over into customer service. I will say that it was also a family-owned business, so I will say that it was probably it was incredibly meaningful work for me. While I learned on the one hand, I did not want to do sales and customer service type roles for my career, and then I wanted to do something different. I did learn the importance of customer service, and that those are principles that you carry with you throughout your entire career. But anyway, while there, I decided I wanted to make a change, and I had always been interested in healthcare, but I needed to figure out how would I transition from selling commercial printing to a healthcare related communications role. And so my first position in healthcare was sales and marketing for an occupational health program. It was based at Jordan Hospital in Plymouth, and so that was kind of my transition. I was doing business to business sales, and so I transitioned into healthcare doing a similar thing, business to business sales, but it was selling occupational health services. And it was in that role that I got much more exposed to the world of healthcare marketing communications as we think of it today. And I fell in love with it. And I worked with many, I don't know, many folks might know Linda Shelton. She's been deeply involved in NESHCo for many years, but Linda, she hired me into a marketing specialist role at Jordan, and it was from there that I became deeply passionate about the professional area, and where I decided to spend the remainder of my career.
And Frank, what was your path? How did you stumble into the illustrious world of healthcare communications?
Stumble is a very good term. Mine was an even longer and more winding road than John's. I think I started out. I was a wrestler, and I wanted to be a phys ed teacher. And then my first encounter with healthcare was a number of shoulder surgeries, and I decided I couldn't be a phys ed teacher, so I became a special ed teacher. So I started my career teaching learning disabled children, and I know those terms have changed over the years. And then I started that's when the stumbling began. I was an administrator and moved into educational media. And then I got recruited by this company called IDG, International Data Group, Computer World, PC World. Worked on the Dummies books, and became a global media specialist. But I reached a certain point that I read this book called The Brand Called You by Tom Peters. It's sort of famous. I use it in my classes. And I went back and I just sort of realized that my core strength, no matter what I was doing, traipsing around the world, was really teaching learning disabled people, whether they be executives or people that are in schools. And I was doing a lot of work teaching people about how to do business around the world. As a result of that, I got asked by HIMSS, this big healthcare IT trade organization. I got asked by them if I would come on their global board to help them transform their traditional media company and content company into a data company and a 21st century
Wow.
model. So I stumbled into healthcare at that point, and I had this obsessive appetite for new things. So I just became consumed by healthcare because I had to understand the healthcare content, and eventually just sort of muscled my way into being a subject matter expert and a journalist and a researcher on all of these things. And now it's, it really is my life. Little did I know that the other career path I would take would be when I became a patient and was laying in a bed and woke up from a 45-day coma and started doing primary research from my bed on patient engagement. So it was sort of interesting that part of my brand was built based on the fact that I was very, very sick for 100 days and was taking every second I could to digest what was going on, and then being able to apply that, because I used to talk about it. Here's what I've heard. And then here's what now becomes, this is what I did. And I'm co-chair now of the Spalding Patient Family Advisory Council. So I continue doing that in a advocacy role as well. So it's become my life, obviously, in a very strange and winding way.
That's an incredible story. Excellent. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Kayla, what about you? Did you take a little bit to get in like John and Frank, or did you jump right in?
So I would say that I took a bit of a journey as well, but I found mine a little bit earlier in life. But what had happened is that I had always wanted to be a dietitian. So I went to the University of Rhode Island wanting to be a dietitian from, like Frank, my own patient experience of being in that environment and feeling like, really touched by what the professionals were doing for me, and even feeling like maybe, hey, maybe I could do a better job at this. And then what happened from there was that I realized I really did not like the clinical landscape. And, halfway through my college career, there's only so many majors you can switch into without having to start all over again. And I was on scholarships, and scholarships wouldn't pay for me to go another 4 years. I had to finish in that allotted amount of time. And one of the majors I could transition to was a public health major. I had no idea what I could do with the degree. There was epidemiology, there was quite a vast majority of places that I could go. However, I just went with the flow. I did health promotion and community health and figured that it would all fall into place. I was working as a pharmacy tech for CVS at the time as well. And my advisor was wonderful. And in my senior year, she saw a job post come through that was for the Hospital Association of Rhode Island. And it was for a fellowship for healthcare communications and policy. And it sounded amazing. And honestly, it came down to really my manager, who was Amanda Barney at the time and also helped manage NESHCo, giving me a chance and seeing that there was some potential there and learning more about the industry and taking me on as a mentor. And as well as the whole entire NESHCo board as well. I learned, a lot about healthcare communications because of the NESHCo board. John, you were on the board as well, and Hillary, when I started to kind of break into healthcare communications. So I'd say that this group has really seen me from the beginning of my career, fresh and right out of college until now. And when I left the Hospital Association, so that way I could, expand and grow a little bit more and learn about a different part of the industry, I went into being part of a federally qualified healthcare center, a Thunder Mist in Rhode Island. And then now being at CVS Health, where, I always felt like I had a weird assortment of skills. And this role kind of just popped up on my LinkedIn. I wasn't even looking, and it said, "You're a perfect match for this." I had never gotten that from LinkedIn. It just said, "We think we found the perfect match for you." And I remember seeing that on my screen and reading it and getting butterflies and being like, "This is me." And it was a new job that was created. And my boss now even said, she's like, "You, during that interview," she's like, "it was as if like I wrote with you in mind when I was doing this interview." And so since then, it's just been probably about, like, I graduated 6 years ago, which is crazy. I know it's not a lot of time, but it has been quite the journey so far. And I have to thank everyone who's been part of that journey with NESHCo, and even the people who took a chance on me, because from what I've spoken to by a lot of healthcare professionals, a lot of people kind of just stumble into this industry, as you said, Hillary, and don't necessarily know that healthcare communications is an option. And I know at URI when I went, it wasn't even a discipline that you could major in. So really keep your options open, and you never know where life will take you.
Awesome. And thank you. What a beautiful plug for NESHCo. Your check's in the mail. Um, but so great hearing all of your stories. I mean, I haven't heard a traditional story about how people got into healthcare communications ever. It's always such a wild ride, and I enjoy hearing it all the time. I'm going to ask you guys this next question because I get it all the time from friends and family. People are like, so what do you do? What exactly healthcare communications? What does that mean? I still don't know what you do all day. So, Frank, I don't know if you want to talk about, what are some of the skills? What are some of the things that you're focusing on day to day, just to give our audience here an idea of what it means to have a career in healthcare communications. What does that involve?
Yeah, it involves a lot of things, but most of my work is developing high impact content, compelling content, controversial content that is based on. I operate very much in like a lot of us do in what I call an outside in model. So I don't like to listen to people in the boardroom, but I spend a lot of time with what I call feral marketing, like a cat, like a feral cat, like being out in the wild and seeing what people are saying on the outside, doing a lot of focus groups to make sure that I can validate some of the messaging that I have that's coming from the customers, if it's a vendor that needs a service, or just fellow patients that's hearing one thing and seeing something else. So most of my work is just trying to shake the branches a little bit, to make people say, wow, this now I understand what all the words are saying in this conference title, but I won't know what it actually means until I get there, but I love the way it sounds. So I do a lot of work with wordsmithing and bringing people together that like to bicker. Because I think that's the way knowledge is formed sometimes. I do a lot of things that are, some people talk about fireside chats. I like to produce fireside spats, and make sure that people are, are getting knowledge and seeing that there's more than one side to issues in healthcare. Healthcare is a very interesting place in terms of moving from a lot of consumer. I ran the International Advertising Association, working with McDonald's and all these consumer brands. But the other thing I find, and I'll be short about this, is that I think most of us realize that innovation in healthcare, other than on the pharmaceutical side, things like that, innovation is relatively glacial in terms of the way how fast things move. And I wasn't used to that. I was used to sort of driving seismic change. And so a lot of what I try to do is try to reverse that, and in a do no harm business, which is the other risk that we have in healthcare, but because innovation is risky and people want to do no harm. So I try to be somewhat of a constructive anarchist in terms of the kinds of things that I'm driving in organizations and new strategies and building their companies.
Oh, absolutely. And I've found that the healthcare communications folks are the ones who are trying to push the envelope and get us to think outside of the box, because healthcare, you're right, in innovation, healthcare can move so slow, ironically. What about you, Kayla? Do you echo some of the skills and the things that Frank was talking about, or describe some of what you've had to do in your journey throughout your career?
Yes, no, definitely. A lot of what Frank had just stated definitely overlaps with some of the skills that I've had to learn and even continue to learn as well. And I would say that starting with the Hospital Association, a big part of that journey was learning about healthcare policy and about health quality initiatives as well. John alluded to or mentioned about do no harm, and then there's also, other initiatives as well that, the American Hospital Association sponsors and partners with to make sure that hospitals and healthcare systems and primary care offices are just all delivering the highest quality of care. So really trying to understand, that level of detail so that way we can communicate that to the providers or even to patients who might not have that level of health literacy is really something that takes skill and takes a lot of time to develop. It's like healthcare has its own dictionary of words and phrases and even acronyms where, if you're using one acronym in healthcare and you use it in a different company, like with CVS, I learned a lot of CVS acronyms are actually overlapping with hospital acronyms. And but they mean different things, or they mean kind of the same thing, but not exactly. So that's definitely a big learning curve when you're in healthcare, is being able to really have a good dictionary and have a good, vocabulary by your side, and understanding what it is that you're talking about and doing the research on it. And I will say that no matter how much you sit there and look at a sheet of paper, it just takes immersion in a lot of meetings and just years of experience in order to fully grasp that. I'm not sure if John and Frank and Hillary, if you echo that as well, but I would say that's probably a big part of the learning curve. And also just learning your audience. Speaking to providers is just a whole other ballgame. As much as they are brilliant professionals, there's also quite, forgive me for saying this, but an ego as well. So learning how to speak to that audience and how to also respectfully break down information is really something where, you have to balance that fine line of, of having that communication that is written at that level, but also, that breaks it down so that way it's very clear and concise. So finding that balance was also something I had to learn. And I think every new healthcare communications professional struggles with as well, and just how to navigate the system and where to go for everything, and your resources, both online and within your own industry. So I would say those are some of the big things that I really have learned and continue to learn within the healthcare landscape.
And John, what about you? What are just to give some color to our audience, about what does a day in the life of a healthcare communicator look like?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that that Frank and Kayla shared. Couple thoughts. So one thing I just want to say about internal communications, I have just seen this over and over throughout my career. They are a vitally important function of every organization. They bring so much value, and honestly, I saw that through the pandemic in spades. Just based on my own personal experience, the information related to policies as things were changing, etc. At Mass General Brigham, the information coming out of the communications team, it was the source of truth, and it was so relied on by every single employee across the organization. It was really it was incredible. So I guess to your question, Hillary, I just want to, a day in the life is for a corp com internal communications professional, is providing vital information, need to know information for staff, helping people to do their jobs, etc. The other piece of our roles, I believe, relates, I think, to a bigger line of thinking, and that's around engagement. And so, it's one thing providing the information that people need to know to do their jobs. It's a very different thing engaging people on the journey of the organization, and engaging people in the strategy, in the vision, helping them to understand their role in the strategy, and helping to achieve that vision. And there's so many different ways to do that. Frank, you touched on some of the, the technology, and we are late adopters, Kayla, no question, but there are new technologies that we can be leveraging to engage members of our organizations, but we also do that through things like storytelling and video, etc. So I think it's kind of like the vital day-to-day need to know information, but it's also that always thinking about how can we engage staff in the journey. And then I guess the other two things I'll say in terms of kind of when I look back on my career, I think the things from my standpoint, you need the skills, the ability to write and all of those kind of nuts and bolts things. But I think what is hugely important is relationship building skills. Many of these organizations are highly matrixed, and there are lots of players, there are lots of politics. I think that the ability to build lasting relationships is hugely important. And I think also being able to think broadly and, see things through more of like a system lens and understand how different areas of an organization connect to other areas. I think that that's also, being a system thinker, a broad thinker is also a very helpful skill.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you for painting that picture. That was great, guys. Um, to move on to our next question, I think back to some of the NESHCo board meetings I attended, and one of the reasons we all used to love those meetings, or we still love those meetings, is we all got to connect with our people. I feel like healthcare communications people, we all get each other, and part of what we get about each other is, healthcare is not even close to a monotonous place. It's a roller coaster. Healthcare is a wild ride. It's always changing. And yet we still love to be along for the ride. So I'd love to hear from you guys, what's kept you hooked all this time to healthcare communications, even when it got tough, or, why is it important to you? Just help our audience understand what makes this industry that's so niche, so special. Kayla, I don't know if you want to kick it off.
So one of my favorite things about healthcare communications is just that, as far as CDS goes, is the gratitude that you receive for delivering that communications to your audience, especially when it is internal facing, and you truly do feel like you're making a difference. Whether you're talking to patients or you're talking to your own colleagues, you know that the information you're about to relay is very useful and that it could change someone's life or how they go about receiving care, or maybe even how they go about providing that care. And there's something just very exciting to be behind that and be part of that. I know as much as COVID-19 has probably, questioned all of our sanity at some point in healthcare communications and marketing, even though it's been this big roller coaster ride and nonstop go, it also is a very exciting and historic time to be in healthcare communications and marketing as well. So that's something where, now that we're at the tail end of COVID and just kind of reflecting on these past 2 years alone in healthcare communications, there's a huge sense of pride in knowing that you were part of these historic communications and, connecting with your communities and making sure everyone knew what they needed to know when they arrive at your facility for care, or what your providers need to know about delivering that care and about being properly suited up in PPE so that way they don't get sick, and making sure your websites are also all well informed and everything, so everyone knows where to go for that source of truth that John was talking about as well. And it's just, I feel like in healthcare communications that your words are super impactful. They are in any field, but in healthcare, it seems like, people really latch on even more to what you are saying than any other industry. And that's really exciting to know that, at least for me, that I'm part of that change. And I feel like I'm making a difference, especially since I wanted to originally be a clinician myself as a dietitian, even though I couldn't, provide that kind of resource. Being able to do that on the communication side is just as gratifying, if not more.
And John, what about you? I mean, you've had a big journey with healthcare, and you've seen some things, to say the least. What would you say has kept you hooked, and why is it important?
I love this question, and I can't help but give a plug to NESHCo, because like what has kept me engaged in healthcare communications is the spirit of NESHCo. Honestly, NESHCo is all about exactly this, right? You're pulling people together to share experiences, share ideas, engage others on the journey. That has been what I have loved about healthcare communications. Like, there is such an incredible support network. I see, and it doesn't even matter, how, I mean, Frank touched on Spalding, which is a member of, Mass General Brigham. Kayla referenced Amanda Barney, who, I haven't spoken to in years, but I think the world of. And I'm looking at Kayla on this screen, and I have like immense pride in how she has, progressed. And, I see a shout out to Kayla from Dan Dunlop, and it's the people. And there's something special about people who choose to get into healthcare communications. I think they care about people, and they have a passion for the the work, but when they come together, there's just such a selfless sharing of knowledge, supporting each other, mentoring each other, and it's just it's a career that I feel so fortunate to have in many ways stumbled upon. Back to your first question, Hillary. But I wouldn't choose I wouldn't choose another career. I have absolutely loved it, and for people who are thinking about getting into it, they would find it so incredibly gratifying. And just another really quick example. Another thing that I love about comms colleagues is, I don't want to go back to COVID, but I will just for a quick moment. There is such a spirit of creativity and ingenuity. And, it was during Surge 1 that, I was on the front lines at Newton Wellesley Hospital, and I was leading comms there. And it was overnight that we stood up a completely different approach to communicating to the staff of that organization. And I will never forget that. That was the team that I was working with at that moment in time. I know everybody on this call will not forget the team that they were with when COVID first hit. But what we did really overnight, I still look back on it with such awe and inspiration. But that's the type of people who work in this area.
And Frank, what about you? What's kept you hooked after you jumped in the pool? What's kept you there all these years? Why is it important to you?
Yeah, just to jump back to John, I mean, I was admitted to Newton Wellesley on March 26th and medevaced out that evening, so I got to experience the fruit of his efforts there. That's just a side note and a plug for the system. So I got to experience that. There's nothing that had to keep me in healthcare. It wasn't like, oh, I'm thinking about doing something else. In fact, I practice this science called anti-fragility, which means that you embrace and thrive on chaos. And the thing about healthcare is that it's overstimulated me. So it's not like I'm trying to find ways to stay interested. I'm trying to manage the interests that I have, because I'm a marketing guy, I'm an advertising guy, I'm a technology guy, and I'm a consumerization guy, and look at all these things and how they come together. I'm a customer engagement person. So we've all gone through our lives where we've seen people quit their jobs, or even ourselves threatening to quit our jobs because I just don't feel like I'm doing anything for society, or I'm not helping the world. I mean, there's never a time in this business where you have to question that. I mean, you are doing it. It is, people say in other businesses, well, it's not life or death. Well, in this business, it is. So I mean, I think we always have that connection that we are doing something better. Are we? Is everything that way? No, some of these things are a complete and total waste of time, and they're just silly ideas looking for a solution and don't have one. But in the experimentation phase and the risk reward analysis that we have in this business, sometimes the minimize the risks, but the rewards are fantastic. I think is what keeps me here. I'm new, and again, everybody's talked about the NESHCo plug, and I think that's great. I'm new to the organization, to NESHCo, and so but I could feel how that can happen. I do know from running events in every industry around the world that when you get marketing communicators together, as opposed to other industries, your bar bill is much higher. So,
None of us are disagreeing.
If we want to call that an indicator of how much we enjoy each other and what we're doing, I can tell you empirically that we like to have a good time and work really hard at the same time. That's not necessarily the case with IT people and other professions. So overstimulation is the problem I have with healthcare, and trying to manage it with an ADHD personality I have.
Hillary, do you mind if can I just add on to that for one quick second?
Yeah.
So when Frank talks about the bar bill, I can't tell you, I'm not going to get into any details, but that conjures up so many memories for me with my NESHCo colleagues. But the other point, and I'm so appreciative, Frank, that you're so forthcoming about your experience with COVID, and I'm so thankful that you're clearly doing as well as you are. The fascinating thing about healthcare is really big, right? But it is so small too. This is fascinating to me. I remember sharing your story, Frank, when I was at Newton Wellesley Hospital. and following your progress. So it's just unbelievable how things come full circle, and it's time and time again in healthcare communications where
Yeah.
it is just such a small supportive network of colleagues and really friends.
Yes, the NESHCo conference cocktail hour is like Vegas. What happens there stays. Hindsight's 2020. We all had a unique journey into healthcare communications. If you could look back at young Frank, young John, young Kayla, or some of our audience members out there who might be considering the career, what would you tell them? What should they consider if they're still finishing up their degree, or if they're already in the field and they're thinking about making the jump? John, we'll start with you. What would you tell those people? What should they consider?
So one of the first thing that came into my head is, beyond thinking about the education and the skill building, etc., it's to identify mentors that you can connect with. When I look back on my career, it was the people who, as Kayla put it, kind of gave you a shot or mentored you, that made all the difference. And I will never forget I mentioned Linda Shelton again, a NESHCo alum. She gave me my first shot, and I'll never forget that. And she was a fabulous mentor. But throughout my career, it was the people who I could learn from, ask questions of. So I think the biggest advice that I would have is, as people, thinking about this career, and that they begin their journey, to identify people who could serve as terrific mentors for them, because it will be incredibly meaningful and helpful to them as they advance in their careers.
Frank, what about you?
I couldn't agree more in terms of the mentoring. Not only having a mentor, but being one is incredibly important. And you learn so much more sometimes from being the mentor than from serving, than being mentored at times. So that's number one. Number two is that I think if I look back, I slowly developed an insatiable appetite for lifelong learning. But I wish I had started doing it more. And in my other businesses, it's always been that IT people should learn the business. And I would say, what the heck are they talking about? They should learn the business. They're in the business. No, that's totally different. So I think that I teach them, and I've been involved in marketing communications courses, and we teach marketing communications, but sometimes we don't teach the business. Like we don't teach in depth about artificial intelligence. So I think everybody has to learn how to be a subject matter expert, as well as being a healthcare communicator. And I teach this as having a double deep or triple deep or quadruple deep skills, that you have the core skills at the top that you were trained in. I graduated from University of Rhode Island, as you said, and went into this profession. But then I start looking down, here's where I am. And then I have these other things that are hanging down. That's IT, that might be human resource, so communication. So how do I become more complicated? And I wish I became more complicated earlier on, rather than having to catch up to do it. I did it pretty quickly in healthcare because I got into it maybe 12 years ago. So I knew that, but in my previous career, becoming more complicated wasn't quite as fast. I thought I was just a great marketing communicator guy, and I didn't need to know the other parts of the business. And we really need to be able to talk the talk to get the credibility and the trust.
I think, yeah, you're totally right. I think all healthcare communicators at one point or another find themselves becoming the jack of all trades. It's not like you've got to know a little bit about everything in order to keep up with everything. Absolutely. Kayla, what would you tell Kayla from maybe 6-7 years ago?
Well, I would first tell Kayla from 6-7 years ago that everything's going to be okay, because this all came along, and I have to give a big shout out to Dan, John, Hillary, everyone that was on the NESHCo board, because when I joined NESHCo and started my journey at the Hospital Association, I was so incredibly lucky to have the mentorship and support from day one out of college. I graduated in late May, and I was starting the week after the 4th of July, just, you know, a month and a half later, which is insane. Like, who gets that lucky? Like, that was just pure luck. And the fact that everything just came together. Someone who was like a mother to me passed away the first day of my last semester. I thought I wanted to drop out and take a gap year. And I had an advisor by my side that said, we're going to work through this. And she was at Mass General, and she had cancer, and they were wonderful there. And that was part of what I just wanted to be part of that. I was like, how can I help people like this in my own way without, of course, it was my senior year. So how do I couldn't become a nurse at that time. I had to figure out another way to help. And I thought my world was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a career path anymore. I just wanted to pull the sheets over my head and just have a little pity party for myself. But I have to say, between Amanda giving me that shot, who again was a NESHCo board member and had helped co-manage this organization, and having the leadership and the mentorship from the NESHCO board and those at the hospital association to help develop my skills as I was a fellow, so part of a fellowship, which is like an internship. Having that opportunity just straight up changed my life, and being open to it too, because when I read it, I did not have the best self-esteem for that. When you're reading that job title right out of college, I was like, I can't do this. Like, they're looking for someone with a master's degree who can do this and that and has these kind of skills. And I'm from the University of Rhode Island with, you know, an okay GPA, but nothing that stands out. And I was ready to really dismiss myself. But because I had that support from my advisor to say, just try, give it a shot, and have, you know, Amanda, you know, later tell me, she's like, I could teach you the skills, but I couldn't teach you the personality. And that was something that has always stuck with me, because she's right. You know, John, going back to what you and Frank were saying, like, you know, this is a community that we're part of. You know, you have to have, like, you know, be able to really build upon good relationships. And I'm trying not to cry, so thank you everyone for being part of this journey. But, you know, it's one of those things where it truly is like everyone on the NESHCO board cared about what happened to me. Like Hillary, like I always loved when you would text me or message me or anything like that. And, you know, anytime we had NESHCO board meetings too, just would reach out. And being the young, cool one on the board too, you know, and local to Rhode Island, you were always a great mentor as well. And Dan, I don't think a holiday or birthday has passed where you haven't sent me a Bitmoji wishing me well. There's just, it's something where it just all came together and happened like it should have. And even from Frank and John's stories of how they got into healthcare communications, it just happened how it should have. We had to all, you know, cry in a corner one day and figure out what was going on in our lives. We all had to have those horrible jobs or have those bad teachers that taught us good lessons at the end of the day. But, you know, it was going from where I was on that first day of my last semester to now. I just would say it's going to be okay. For those of you who are about to graduate or not sure what you're going to do, it's going to be okay. Don't be afraid to apply for any job that's out there. Like, you don't know unless you try. There's a very famous saying that says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that is so true, because even this CVS job, I was like, oh my God, like they're looking for someone who can do national communications. I'm from the smallest state in Rhode Island. How am I going to make a difference? And having the leadership too for CVS, and even like, you know, Dan, when I reached out to Dan and said, what do you think? And he said, absolutely, go for it. You can do this. I know you can. I'm here for support. Like, that just meant the world to me, because, you know, regardless of whether I was on the board or not, or a member or not, like, that was just invaluable personal experiences and relationships that I have had that just no amount of money in the world could ever replace. And it's so is important that you really preserve your reputation in this industry, and you just be a good person, because people are going to remember you for the rest of their lives. And when they have an opportunity to pop up, they're going to think of you, or they're going to have your back. So I do want to thank everyone who's been on the NESHCO board, and everyone who's been part of NESHCO, and past and prior, you know, and current bosses. Today's Employee Appreciation Day. So everyone that has been part of that journey, thank you. Everyone who is just about to start their journey, join NESHCO. I know this is like, you know, NESHCO plug, but join NESHCO, seriously, become involved. Join, you know, professional development groups, do everything you can to hone your skills. and to learn new skills, especially if it's free. Like if there's a free opportunity as part of like your college, do it. You know, Hillary's on the Rhode Island College, like she does a lot with Rhode Island College and is always doing professional development too. And, you know, just always keep learning, just like Frank said, just always keep learning.
Wow, I think I'm seeing like the TED big letters come up behind you. That was excellent. I'm moved over here. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to go to the last question, which I think is a really fun one. And that is, tell me about your favorite memory or your biggest win from your career so far. Or better yet, if you don't have one of those right off the top of your head, what is your why for your career? And Frank, I'll start with you.
Well, it was more of an epiphany than it was a why, but it became a why. You know, when I was in during that period, when I woke up, I was going through a lot of loneliness because we were all isolated for 22 hours a day through nobody's fault. It was sort of institutionalized, as I call it. And I was the word pity party was used at a certain point. I remember in terms of Kayla mentioning it herself. Well, I was sort of going through that myself. And one of the things I learned that really changed my life was that when I started talking about what I was writing about and researching in my bed as being the result of COVID, was that I found that so many of the people that were taking care of me were going through even more of it than I was. So my oh wow moment, or holy shit moment, pardon my French, was like, oh my God, I thought I was lonely, but I found out that it was sort of a lonely festival, that it was lonely people taking care of lonely people. And I learned very quickly that you know, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So my loneliness was exactly related to what my caretakers were. And it sort of rebooted the way I thought. It made me think totally differently that you know, I wasn't really looking to what was happening to the other people as a result of taking care of me. So when it comes to patient engagement and consumerization, things like that, it completely gave me a different why. Why am I doing this? It's not because it's patient engagement, but patient engagement is clinical engagement at the same time. So I hate the word holistic, but I'll say it for the purposes of this webinar. It gave me much more of a holistic way of what I was thinking. And that holistic part became the why in the work that I do, and the what and the where and the how.
Oh, love that. And Kayla, what about you? What's your why, or what's your favorite memory or your biggest win from your career?
Oh, this is so tough because there are so many really good memories and, you know, big whys. I mean, my big why is that, you know I kind of touched upon this, but my grandmother was a nurse for over 40 years. And she's the one who visited, you know, on the top floor of, you know, Mass General for her cancer treatments. And, you know, that was right before I entered the industry. So it wasn't while I was working, but I knew I wanted to be someone's why, you know, they continue to seek out care, and why they wanted to keep on going, and how to keep them encouraged in that line of care too, and everything, because it's very easy to lose hope in healthcare, you know, especially when you're part of a patient's journey or the patient themselves. So my why is to keep people going, is to make sure that my words are being just impactful to, you know, providers as they are to patients, and making sure that we're engaging people to come back to care too, especially now that we're coming out of COVID, because, you know, doctor's office rates are lower than ever. People aren't getting the ongoing care that they need to get because they're afraid to get that care. So making sure that they're, you know, that they're coming in, and with every, you know, I imagine my audience like my grandma. I always like to think that she's the person that I'm talking to. So everything that I write, I'm always thinking like, how would I say this to my grandma, who needs hope and needs that encouragement to come and seek care and continue on with her care, you know? And I would say that one of my best memories, I would say that every time I was, you know, given the opportunity for a new career, you know, whether it was the Hospital Association, Thunder Mist, or CVS, those had to be some of the biggest highlights of my career, and even being a mental health advocate for an organization at one point as well, that there's just nothing better than knowing that, you know, you're about to take the skills that you've learned with you to somewhere else, and you can help other colleagues, and colleagues can help you. So that's a really great feeling, at least for me, and some of the best highlights off the top of my head I can think of.
John, take us home.
Yeah, so there's definitely a thread that's being woven through, I think, all of these comments. I think for me, it was it was learning early on the impact that communicators can have on people's lives. And for me, there's one experience that it was just incredible for me. I was very early in my career at Jordan Hospital, and I was approached by Judy Richards, who was a nurse in the OR, and Carolyn Fahey, who was also a nurse in the OR. They came to me asking for help in passing a law. So Judy's daughter, Kayla, had passed away while running on a treadmill in Plymouth. And so there was no AED on site, automatic external defibrillator. So they wanted to, they said, we want to pass a law and we need your help. And so we set out on this journey to, it was PR, it was media, it was internal communications. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my entire career. But ultimately, we did pass a law, and Mitt Romney signed, was one of the final laws that he signed before he left office as the governor of Massachusetts. And since then, because of the law, there have been thousands of lives that have been saved, whether it's in a healthcare. It's basically the law was to require AEDs in every healthcare facility in Massachusetts. And because of that, I know lives have been saved, many of them. But I think my point here is that it became so apparent to me at that moment, like, wow, communicators in whatever shape or form, whether it's writing content, as Kayla described, or involved in PR and things like I just described in my time at Jordan Hospital, you can absolutely 100% have an incredibly meaningful impact on the lives of people everywhere in what we do.
Oh, love that. 100%. Because I think people think, well, if I just go into the communications and marketing, what difference does that make? And it makes all the difference in the world. And I think you all agree that once you do healthcare communications, you almost can't go to anything else. It's nothing ever feels like it stacks up. I did put a message in the chat, and I wanted to open up if anyone wants to ask any questions of our panelists. Feel free to do so now. Otherwise, I'm sure that these esteemed panelists would all be open to you connecting with them on LinkedIn if you had any questions or were looking to just have a conversation with them. And really, thank you so much to our panelists for attending. And this was such a heartwarming session. And even for those who aren't new to healthcare communications, I hope this was a great energizer for you in what's been such an exhausting time in healthcare. And I think this kind of renews our bond. And I just did want to give a quick plug quickly for NESHCo, the New England Society of Healthcare Communicators. For those who aren't members, there's a lot of opportunities to participate and experience webinars and educational sessions like this. The camaraderie we mentioned, some conferences, mentorship, and for a small yearly fee, you too can be adopted into this family. So feel free to visit NESHCo.org and you can learn more about NESHCo. So thank you everybody for joining us, and hope you have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you,
Thank
Hillary.
you.
Take care,
Bye.
Bye-bye,
Kayla.
everybody.
Frank.